And so good day everyone. I am Ms. SHEENA DORIA and I am from the MEM ELM program. Today I will be discussing with you my topics, which are the child abuse issues and special parental authority. So let us start. Let me share first with you the overview of my topic, which is the definition of child abuse, types of child abuse, the latest statistic on child abuse, child protection policy, and the family code special parental authority. So let us start by defining first what is child abuse. Okay, so child abuse, it refers to the maltreatment, whether habitual or not, of the child who are 18 years old below. Or we also consider those who are over but are unable to fully take care of themselves or protect themselves. So these are the ones who have mental or physical disabilities. So this definition is according from the Republic Act 7610. Okay? Now, there are different types of child abuse. So let us guess, okay, based from the picture, what kind or what type of child abuse is being shown. The first one is this one. So what do you think is the type of child abuse being shown here? Okay, so this one is the physical abuse. So when we say physical abuse, it is not just limited to battering, pinching, kicking, hitting a person, or hitting a child. Okay, it also includes when you give a task to a student or to a child which cause physical harm to that child, that would be also included as physical abuse. Okay, next one is this one. Okay, so what do you think is the type of child abuse being shown here? All right, so this one is an example of sexual abuse. So sexual abuse includes rape, any form of sexual harassment, which may also include lasciviousness, okay, and many more. When you touch the private parts and many more. Next is this one. So as we can see in the picture, the girl is being called weak, worthless, okay, sickening. So this one is an example of emotional or psychological abuse. Okay, so when you inflicted an act that demeans or degrades a child's dignity, intrinsic worth, that is included as the emotional abuse. And this one, okay, as you can see in the picture, okay, the father, I think, is doing something else while the child is being left behind or being neglected. Okay, so this is an example of neglect. Okay, neglect, it's like discriminating a child, excluding the child, leaving the child behind. Okay, so that is neglect. So these types of child abuse, I got this from the World Health Organization. Okay, now based on the latest statistic data that I got from the Philippine Statistic Authority, which in 2016, okay, in 2016 there were 3,857 cases served, okay, and 26% of that were child being neglected, while 21% were sexually abused, and then 5% were physically maltreated. And there are many more or other kind of child abuse. Okay. While this data is from the UNICEF, this is last 2015. Okay, there were 2 in 3 children experience physical violence, while 2 in 5 experience psychological violence, and there is 1 in 4 experience sexual violence, And there were 2 in 3 experienced peer violence. Okay, so this is from the UNICEF 2015. And then this one, I got this from the Department of Education. Not really sure of the year. Okay, so this one shows the violence, physical, verbal, and sexual abuse inflicted by teachers and other school personnel. Okay, so for grades 1 to 3, the most common types of abuse are the physical abuse and the verbal abuse. So it is shown here that 3 out of 10 of the victims were physically abused, while 4 out of 10 were verbally abused. And then same thing goes with the higher grade level. Physical and verbal abuse were also inflicted. So for physical abuse, there were 5 out of 10, and for verbal abuse, there were 7 out of 10. And then for grades 4 to 6, they also experienced verbal sexual violence or inappropriate touching. Okay, so for verbal sexual violence, verbal only, this is 36.53%. Wow, that's a lot. And for inappropriate touching, there are 11.95%. Okay, and then for high school, 42.88% for verbal sexual violence and 17.60% for inappropriate touching. So we can see from the data that child abuse, child violence, discrimination, exploitation is evident, and it's really existing in our community. Okay, that's why we have laws on child protection. Okay, there are many laws, existing laws on child protection. So what are those? The first one, we have the Republic Act 7610. This is the more general one, which it is an act providing for stronger deterrence and special protection against child abuse, exploitation, and discrimination, and for other purposes. We also have Anti-Violence Against Women and Their Children Act of 2004. If you are familiar with the term or the acronym VOW-C. Okay, so it is the Republic Act number 9262. Okay, we also have here an Anti-Child Pornography Act of 2009, which is the Republic Act 9775. We also have Cybercrime Prevention Act of 2012, Republic Act 10175. Republic Act 9745, which is the Anti-Torture Act of 2009. And we also have here the Republic Act number 9231, which is the Anti-Child Labor Law. And there were many more specific child protection laws. Okay. Also, the Philippine Constitution, our Philippine Constitution, the 1987 Philippine Constitution, states that the state shall defend the right of the children. And there are also DepEd memorandum on the child protection. The first one is the DepEd Order 40 series of 2012. That is the most familiar one, DepEd Child Protection Policy. But we also have here the DepEd Order 55 series 2013. This one is the implementing rules and regulations of Republic Act number 10627, otherwise known as the Anti-Bullying Act of 2013. We also have DepEd Order number 18 series of 2015, which is the DepEd Guidelines and Procedures on the Management of Child at Risk and Children in Conflict with the Law. Okay, so now I will be focusing on the DepEd Child Protection Policy, since most of us are in the field of education, okay, and are teachers, so this will be beneficial for most of us. Here, okay, so the DepEd Order number 4 series of 2012, also known as the Child Protection policy. So this is a pursuant to the 1987 Constitution, Philippine Constitution, which states that the state shall defend the right of the children. And since most of the children's time is at school, okay, so this is very, the implementation and development of this kind of policy must be implemented. Okay, now let me ask you first this true or false question. Okay, what do you think? Is it true or false? 18 years old and older who are in school are considered child. Is it true or false? Alright, so it is true. According to the DepEd Order Number 4 Series of 2012, or the Child Protection Policy, okay, so for the purpose of this policy or DepEd order, 18 years old and older who are in school are considered child. So they are being covered in this policy. Okay, now what are the acts prohibited by this policy? Okay, so the first one is the child abuse, most especially the child abuse. So the child abuse, as I've discussed earlier, there are different types. So it can be psychological, physical, sexual, neglect, emotional. Okay, it may also include the deprivation of the basic needs of a child, or if there are such acts that degrades the dignity of the child, and also the failure of providing or giving medical treatment is considered child abuse. Okay, next is the discrimination against children. So if there is an incident or situation wherein a child is being excluded due to his or her sexual orientation, preferences, religion, race, language, okay? So those are considered as discrimination. Next one, child exploitation. So when we say exploitation, it's where we use a child for your own benefit or for the benefit of others. So there are two different types of that. We have the sexual exploitation and the economic exploitation. So when we say sexual exploitation, a person force a child to perform sexual activities, okay, for his or her own benefit or for the benefit of others. So that is just child sexual exploitation. While the other one, which is the economic exploitation, it's where you use a child to work for you, okay, for your own benefit. So that is another one, okay. Although there are some children who works, okay, if they are not being forced and they are willing to work, that wouldn't be included as child exploitation. Especially those who are under the show business, okay, they must have permit from the Department of Labor and Employment. Okay, next one is the violence against children. So this is kind of the same with child abuse. So it also includes physical violence, sexual violence, psychological violence, and others. And then the corporal punishment. This is very evident in school, but it is not just happens in school, it also happens at home, right? Corporal punishment exists when there is a punishment is used for disciplining purposes. Okay, so if that punishment is aggressive or results harm to the child, that is a corporal punishment and it is being prohibited by this act. And then last one is the bullying or peer abuse. Okay, so bullying, it happens when another child inflicted an harmful action towards another child. That is bullying or peer abuse. Okay, now who are the responsible for the implementation of this DepEd order? Of course, it starts from the central office. Okay, they are the ones who are responsible for the proper dissemination of this policy and for the development of guidelines, programs, intervention programs, trainings, and many more. It will then be relayed to the regional offices, down to the division office, and down to the school. So I will be more focusing on the duties and responsibilities of the school. Okay, so what are the duties and the responsibilities of the school? Okay, so the school, which is headed by the school head, okay, shall ensure that the, the school adopts the policy and make sure that the teachers, the all the personnel, the non-teaching, teaching personnel, the parents, and the students are aware of this policy. That's why it's really important to conduct trainings, okay? That's in-service trainings. Sometimes it is included, the child protection policy in our part. For example, we actually discuss the CPC, the child protection policy during our in-service training, and also we discuss it during the parent orientation before the school year starts. Okay, and also the students must be well aware of this policy. Okay, also the school must organize a child protection committee for the school. Okay, later on I will discuss who are the members of the committee. And then there shall be our maintenance or proper keeping of the record of all proceedings related to bullying or related to any kind of child abuse cases that happened within the school. So there should be a proper bookkeeping of that. And then there has to be coordination with the other agencies, okay, the DSWD or other government agencies on the child protection. So to provide the school assistance when it comes to handling or addressing such cases. Next is the school personnel. So school personnel includes teaching and non-teaching staff. So it includes the teachers, the nurses, the librarians, the utilities, and others, okay? Their one duty is to exercise the special parental authority. Okay, they must serve as a good example. They must enhance, protect, and preserve their physical and mental health at all times. Okay, they must also inculcate the value of respect and obedience. So, also, the school personnel shall also strictly comply with the school's child protection policy. Next one is the students. Of course, the students also have duties and responsibility. First one is they must comply with the school regulations. Okay, they must respect other people's opinion to avoid bullying. And finally, they must observe the code of conduct for pupils, students, and learners. Okay, now let us read this scenario. It is just an example of a case, a child abuse case, okay, happened in school. So this is a real scenario. So let us read. Okay, a child was rushed to the hospital because some acid had spilled on her arms during a laboratory experiment in school. According to her classmates, their teacher in charge went outside when the accident happened. Can we hold the school or teacher liable for the expenses incurred in the medication of the child? So what do you think is the answer? Is it a yes or a no? Okay, so the answer in this one, it is a yes. Okay, why? Because we have this so-called special parental authority, which is indicated in the Family Code of 1987 or 1986. Okay, under the Article 218 under the Chapter 2, it is stated that the school, its administrators, the teacher, or the individual, entity, or institution engaged in child care shall have special parental authority and responsibility over the minor child while under their supervision, instruction, or custody. Meaning, since that child is under your supervision, it is within the school hours, the student is at school within the classroom, the teacher left, okay, maybe in some reasons, and then the accident happened, the teacher will still be held liable just because the children is under your supervision when that incident happened. Okay, so this is not just limited to within the classroom. If the incident happened outside the classroom, let's say for example you have field trip, okay, and then there is an accident happen, but still that child is under the fact that the child is under your supervision or custody, you will be still held liable for that. Okay, so it is really important for us teachers to really be sensitive and really be aware of this policy. And let us not forget that our duty is to facilitate our child. Okay, now there is this establishment of the CPC or the Child Protection Committee. So who are the members of the committee? First one is the school head, okay, who serves as the chairperson. Next is the guidance counselor or teacher, who serves as the vice chairperson. And then there is the representative of the teacher as designated by the faculty club, representative of the parents designated by the parent-teacher association, representative of the pupils as designated by the student school council. Okay. And last one, the representative from community as designated by the punong barangay. So what are the functions of this committee? The first one, they are responsible for the information dissemination programs with regards to the child protection. They also establish a system for identifying students who may be suffering from significant harm. They shall also monitor the implementation of positive measures and ensure that the children's right to be heard are respected and upheld in all matters and procedures affecting their welfare and accomplishment of intake sheet. So there is an intake sheet that needed to be accomplished whenever there is a complaint or there is cases. Also, the committee shall be responsible for the investigation and proper counseling intervention if there is some cases or complaint that happen. Okay, now, according to this policy, there is preventive measures, okay, which is capacity building of school official, personnel, parents, and students. So when we say capacity building, it's providing seminars, providing trainings to the school official, personnel, parents, and students on the child protection. Okay. Next is, if there will be still cases, and if there will be still some cases that will occur, okay, there will be protective and remedial measures to be followed. So there will be procedures, appropriate procedures to be followed in addressing some complaints and cases. So the first one is, how do we address bullying? So I will not go deeply in this topic because this will be discussed by other reporter. So according to this policy, okay, if there is a complaint from the parent, okay, it has to be a written complaint. So a complaint always has to be through writing, and then it will be reported and submitted to the school head. But however, most of the time, right, the teachers try to settle it within the classroom, settle it within the parents, okay, with the advice of their grade level chairman and the guidance teacher, okay, to avoid making the case or the issue larger, okay. So, but according to the policy, it is really important. The proper way of addressing bullying is to report it to the school head. Okay, if you were not able to settle it on your own within the classroom, so that's the time that we call for the help of our school head. So the complaint must be reported to the school head through writing, and then the school head will then inform the offending child, the parent of the offending child, through writing as well. And then the parent, the offending child, or the parent of the offending child has the right to answer the letter through writing as well. And then there will be a meeting. Okay. Now, the case will be referred to the CPC or the committee for proper counseling and intervention. Okay? So if there will be penalty warranted, it must be imposed by the school head in the presence of the parents. So hindi pwede yung nagsasabi tayo na suspended, yung madalas na nakikita natin na sa mga palabas na nagsususpend ang mga bata without the presence of the parents. So that is not correct. And the penalty must also be done through writing as well. So there, everything must be done through writing for proper documentation. Okay, now, how about there is child abuse, exploitation, violence, and discrimination case that happens in the school, okay, which sometimes inflicted by the teacher or the school personnel. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do, of course, that's needed to be done by the parent, okay, is to report case. There will be no case if it is not being reported. Okay, so first is there should be reporting of the cases, and then there will be investigation afterwards. Okay, so again, it's through writing. The complaint from the parent must be through writing, which will be submitted to the school head. Okay, and then if the one being complained of is the teacher or the teaching personnel or the school personnel, so this is the process that we need to follow. Okay, so the parent will complain through writing, so it will be reported to the school head. Okay, upon the receipt of that complaint, it shall be forwarded to the disciplining authority within 48 hours. So the disciplining authority will then start an investigation not later than 72 hours. The disciplining authority, as I have searched, it is the Secretary of the Department of Education Regional Office, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, so if the school head failed to report it within the given time, it will be it will be called as neglect of duty. Okay, next one. If the person complained of is a non-teaching personnel, the school's division superintendent shall cause the conduct of fact-finding investigation within the same period. Okay? And then, if prima facie exists, so when we say prima facie, it is at the first impression. At the first impression, you can see that the person being complained of really is liable for that complaint. Okay, the respondent, or the one being complained of, may be placed under preventive suspension pending investigation for a period of 90 days. Okay, this is also for the purpose of giving having the child at ease to go to school, not being afraid of going to school because of thinking that the child might see, okay, that the teacher or the person that inflicted an abuse towards him or her. Okay, so that's also one of the reason, and also to avoid communicating with other teachers, influencing other students. Okay, next one. Okay, so the school head, okay, to during the period of investigation. Now, during the span or during the time of investigation, okay, so the next is the school head may refer the victims and the offenders to the local social welfare and development office for assessment and appropriate intervention. So the school head must coordinate with any government agencies on child protection for them to provide assistance with regards to the counseling, proper counseling and intervention towards the victims, because the victims might be experiencing some trauma. Okay, next is, okay, all throughout the fact finding or the investigation, the revised rules of procedures of DepEd in administrative cases shall apply in all other aspects. And then, of course, the identity or other information that may be reasonably identify the pupil. So all the information must be confidential. And on the part, if the teacher is the one who is being complained of, Republic Act number 4670 or the Magna Carta for Teachers must be considered or followed. Okay, and then next one, there shall be reporting and monitoring, of course. Okay, so the intake sheet is being accomplished by the committee, okay, and the disciplining authority. It shall be forwarded to the DepEd Division Office, and then the DepEd Division Office will consolidate all the reports and then submit it to the regional office. Okay, and then the regional office will consolidate the reports on the incident and cases of division offices within the region and submit a regional report to the Undersecretary for Legal and Legislative Affairs. And then after that, the central office will be the central repository of the regional reports. So this is their way of reporting and monitoring. There, so here are my references. Thank you for listening. I hope that you learned or take away something from me. Thank you very much.
Good day, Dr. Colinares. Good day, classmates. My name is Maria Carmela G. ASEBIAS. I'm taking Master's in Educational Management, major in Educational Leadership Management. And for today's subject, MEM 645, Education Laws, Practices, Trends, and Issues, I am about to discuss the topics positive discipline and lowering the age of criminal liability. Let's talk about positive discipline, but before that, let's have the different learning objectives. First, define the positive discipline, followed by explain the importance of positive discipline, and third, to give examples of positive discipline. Let's take a look at these pictures. The first picture, we have the mother and then the daughter, where the mother is holding a belt. The second picture, there is a father, let's say the father and then a son, where the father is hitting or spanking his son. The third picture, let's say that they are pupils or students, they are raising their hands. Maybe they are being punished by their instructor. And then the fourth picture is there is an adult where he is pointing somewhere, and then we see that the kid go the place or the area where the teacher is pointing. These four pictures are example of corporal punishment. But what is corporal punishment? Corporal punishment is defined by United Nations as any punishment in which physical force is used and intended to cause some degree of pain or discomfort. Just like what we can observe in these pictures. In the Philippines, a study conducted by Save the Children year 2005 that 85% of children have experienced corporal punishment in their homes. It means they are being abused or harmed by their families. They have consistently demonstrated that physical punishment predicts negative outcomes throughout childhood and into adulthood. It increases children's risk for increased aggression, increased delinquency, and antisocial behavior, physical injury, and poor parent-child relationship as well as poorer mental health. It is also associated with lower self-esteem and poorer academic success. The Department of Education, DepEd, has issued Department Order 40 Series 2012, which prohibits the use of corporal punishment and promotes the use of positive discipline. But what is positive discipline? Positive discipline is an approach to teaching that helps children succeed and gives them the information they need to learn and supports their development. It respects children's rights to healthy environment and development, protection from violence, and active participation in their learning. Effective discipline is positive and constructive. School should respect children's developmental levels. In positive discipline approach, we have different principles such as the holistic, strength-based, constructive, inclusive, proactive, and participatory. We are going to expound or explain these different principles. Let's start in holistic. It applies not only to students' behavior, but to all aspects of their learning and social interactions. That's why we need to empower our learners or our pupils in different dimensions such as the physical, emotional, mental, social, and spiritual. The next one is strength-based. It identifies and builds on the student's strengths. Based on multiple intelligence by Howard Gardner, we have different intelligences and we have our unique style of learning. And we need to encourage our learner and empower them based on their strength. Next is the constructive. It is aimed at strengthening student self-esteem and confidence. We need to encourage them to speak, to build their own ideas, to think outside the box, and let them express themselves. Inclusive. It encourages and respects the diversity of all students, in spite of your race, your gender, your perspective in life, belief, religion, despite of your physical appearances, you are valued. Proactive. It identifies the roots of behavioral and learning difficulties and implements strategies to promote success and avoid conflict. That's why the teacher talks to the learner or thinking different strategies where the teacher can give the best service to her pupils that can motivate them to become a better person. Participatory, it engages students in the learning. As we can see in these sample pictures, we encourage our learners to engage in their in learning and discover different lectures, topics, concepts on their own. And responding with discipline, positive discipline, I have here different examples where we are going to um, answer or respond based on positive discipline approach. We have different steps. We have 5 steps. First, what do you think could be the possible reasons why a child might behave this way? Step 2, now remember your long-term goals or your aim for that behavior. Third, in this situation, how can you show warmth or how can you show your love, your care? Number 4, in this situation, how can you provide structure? And step 5, responding with positive discipline. So let's have this example. First, when we have the student or kids grabbing others' belongings such as toys, things, foods, materials, school supplies, and others. Step 1, some reasons could be, for example, the child doesn't really understand the idea of personal property yet because of their age, or the child might not fully understand the effects of her behavior on other children. Could be the child may not know how to approach other child to borrow things or ask for food, and so on. Then the step 2, now remember your long-term goals. You want the child to be able to respect others' belongings. And you want the child to be able to learn to share and to cooperate with others. So that's your target. That's your aim. The step 3, in this situation, how can you show warmth? Understand that children at this age do not understand the concept of ownership and the need to ask and wait for permission. Speak to the child with gentle, reassuring voice. The step 4, in this situation, how can you provide structure? Explain and establish the rules of behavior right at the beginning of the school year. The children themselves should participate in identifying the rules so that they own the rules. Could be help the children understand that if they want to borrow something from their classmate, asking permission is a good way to build a relationship. And then the last step, responding with positive discipline. Do not punish the kid or the student. In a calm voice, explain the value of asking and waiting for permission. You may integrate values education on sharing, cooperation, and taking turns. And try role playing during playtime. The next example, for example, there are students who have no assignments or projects. First step, find the reason. The student may have low persistence level. Could be the student may have difficulty managing his time, balancing schoolwork and social life, or the student may be pressured by peers, or the project may not be suited to the student's capability. After that, our long-term goals. You want the student to be able to manage time. You want the student to set priorities. You want the student to keep trying. You want the student to ask for help. You want the student to become a competent person. Then the third step, we are going to talk to the pupil in private or the student in private, show concern to the student regarding his performance, provide support and guidance. Number 4, we are going to provide clear instructions about how to do the project, ask the student about possible time-saving strategies, provide information about the importance of completing project, or let him know that he can always ask for help if he needs it. And then the positive discipline approach, the step 5, we are going to show support and concern for our students. Ask them if he needs help in doing the project. We can also negotiate with him on how he can make up for the assignments and projects. Ask his suggestions or opinions, and encourage students to help each other in completing assignments or projects. So let's have your own opinion or your own side, your own stand regarding these different issues we experiencing as a teacher inside the classroom. For example, we have students who are behavioral problems such as absenteeism or tardiness, What are you going to do? What are your plans or positive discipline approach? You can comment on our live chat box. For example, you have a student, you are a kinder teacher or a primary teacher, you have a student who are always crying, what are you going to do? And number three, there are fighting inside the classroom. What are your strategies or approach, or how can you apply the positive discipline inside the classroom? So you may share your insights, your opinions, your stand in our live chat. Thank you very much for your insights, for your comments. Thank you very much. Let me have this saying that practicing positive discipline involves a thoughtful and holistic approach to your relationships with young people. And if you want to have more readings regarding positive discipline, you may read in Positive Discipline in Everyday Teaching, a primer for Filipino teachers, published year 2015 by Department of Education. So let's have our next topic, the continuation of my report, but the different topic, the lowering the age of criminal liability. Again, we have different learning objective for this topic. First, to know the impact of lowering the age of criminal liability, followed by to compare the different opinions regarding lowering the age of criminal liability and give own opinion regarding lowering the age of criminal liability. Let's take a look at this picture. We have two pictures showing a child or a kid inside the prison or inside the jail. And let me read with you the example of a crime or issue abroad, international, not in the Philippines, abroad, showing related issue in this topic. Eric Smith, the picture, the boy, age 13 at that time, he killed 4-year-old Derek Robbie at the New York year 1993. Smith is said to have tortured Robbie as a way of unleashing the anger he had over being bullied by the family members and other children at school. He was convicted of second-degree murder in 1994. He has consistently been denied in his attempts for parole. And then the second example, we have two girls here. Year 2014, 12-year-old schoolmates, Morgan Gazer and Anissa Weyer, led their victim to the woods under the pretense of a game of hide and seek. The pair then pinned the female victim down and proceeded to stab her 19 times, causing the victim a serious injury. It was alleged that the girls carried out the attack in order to appease Slender Man, a mythological creature popular on internet forums. And based on their attorneys, both girls have mental illnesses, and the case is ongoing until now. So those two examples, the two issues I am mentioned, I read, are issue of criminal case happen abroad. But here in the Philippines, based on chief of the PNP Women and Children Protection Center, they approve or welcome the idea to lower the age of criminal responsibility to 12 years old from 15 years old. Why? Why they are favor? Based on data collected by PNP, a total of 11,324 crimes incidents involving minors were recorded in 2018, 21% lower than the 2017 total of 14,409. Police data showed that theft was the number one crime committed by underage offenders at 6,535, followed by rape, a heinous crime, next physical injury, robbery, and drug-related offenses. PNP figures also showed that the number of offenses increased with age among minors. From year 2016 to 2018, those age 5, imagine 5 years old and below, were tagged in 10 incidents. 6 to 8 years old in 132 incidents, and 9 to 11 years old, 654 cases way back in those years, 2016 to 2018. The figures spike among older teens, 12 to 15 years old, then 16 to 17 years old. According to PNP, it is more apt to lower the age of criminal liability to 12 years old instead of 9, as originally proposed, as it matches PNP data. The House of Representatives approved on the third and final reading House Bill 8858, which lowers the age of criminal liability from 15 to 12 years old. Under the bill, minors aged 12 to 17 years old who commit serious crimes, example murder, parricide, kidnapping, infanticide, or so on heinous crimes, will be sent to the nearest intensive juvenile intervention and support center. But despite of different data gathered by PNP or obvious crimes being committed by our minors, why experts strongly oppose lowering the age of criminal responsibility? Lowering the age of criminal responsibility is an act of violence against children. Children who are exploited and driven by adults to commit crimes need to be protected, not further penalized, according to UNICEF. When the Philippines ratified the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, year 1990, it meant the country committed to place the best interests of children as its primary concern when crafting policies that concern them. Children are still developing their decision-making capacity and therefore do not know how to fully discern by themselves yet. According to Psychological Association of the Philippines, children are less able to consider and understand the long-term consequences of their actions. Discernment between right and wrong requires intellectual, emotional, and psychological maturity. This is a tall order for children who are still in the process of developing in all aspects. The PPS said, younger children need protection from the law and should not be held criminally responsible for their actions. The National Commission on Human Rights denounced the bill, saying that punishing children for the crime and abuse of syndicates and other people is against the state's responsibility to look after the interests and welfare of children. Under the Convention on the Rights of the Child, which the Philippines has ratified, the arrest, detention, or imprisonment of children should only be used as a last resort, and rehabilitation is a priority. So I am asking you guys, how about your side opinion about lowering the age of criminal liability? Despite that we've seen different crimes committed by our minors. You can type your reply, your answers, your opinions on our chat box. What can you say? Are you in favor of lowering the criminal liability or criminal responsibility or not? Thank you very much for your replies, for your thoughts. Let's have this saying from Barack Obama. Our most important task as a nation is to make sure all our young people can achieve their dreams. So if you have more readings regarding to my topic about positive discipline and about lowering the criminal responsibility, you may visit these different sources. Thank you very much for listening. God bless.
Hello everyone! In this video, I'm going to discuss the evolution of the Philippine Constitution. To fully understand how the Philippine Constitution evolved, Let's start with the definition of a constitution. What is a constitution? A constitution is a set of rules that guides how a country, state, or other political organization works. So this is like a rulebook for the government, and all rules stated in this rulebook must be followed by the government. This document also creates the branches, the powers, and responsibilities of the government. It also contains the rights of the people, and it is illegal for the government to violate these rights. If they do, they will be punished by the law. The Constitution is also often known as the supreme law of the land. This means that it is the highest law in a country. The government cannot pass a law which goes against the Constitution. All laws must comply with the principles set out in a Constitution. Take note of this. No one, not even the president, can go against the Constitution. Here is a fun fact. Did you know that every February 2 is our Constitution Day? For those of you who are not aware of this, for every change in the Constitution, the President will release a proclamation to commemorate the date when the new charter will take effect. This day is called the Constitution Day. The latest Constitution of the Philippines was ratified on February 2, 1987. This is the reason why we celebrate our Constitution Day every 2nd of February. Now that we already know the meaning of a constitution, let's move on to the importance of a constitution. Why is it important for us to have a constitution? First, it's to maintain law and order. Imagine our country without a constitution. It will be in chaos. We Filipinos will be denied of our rights. Anarchy is possible. When we say anarchy, it's a state of a society without authorities or a governing body. So without someone who will lead us, our society will be in a total confusion. Second, it imposes rules and regulations. The Constitution serves as a guide to the government officials in managing the government. It tells them the things that they should do and the things that they shouldn't do. Third, it protects the rights and freedoms of the citizen. If you're posting on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram right now, you are exercising your freedom of expression expressed in our Constitution. This is just one right. There are other rights that we can enjoy because of the Constitution. So we really need to be thankful to our Constitution. Fourth, it limits the powers of the government. Without the Constitution, greedy officials will take advantage and the government will function according to its will. So it is a must for us to have a constitution. Now let's move on to the evolution of the Philippine Constitution. What you're seeing right now is a timeline of all the constitutions in the history of the Philippines. We have a total of 6 constitutions, starting from the first constitution, the 1899 Malolos Constitution, down to the latest constitution, the 1987 Philippine Constitution. Among these 6 constitutions, only 3 effectively governed the country. These are the 1935 Constitution, the 1973 Constitution, and the 1987 Philippine Constitution. Later on, you'll understand why only 3 effectively govern the country. For now, let's travel back in time and get to know each constitution. In your Philippine History 101, you've already discussed that the Philippines was under the Spanish rule for 333 years. Most Filipinos thought that it was a hopeless case until the Spanish-Filipino Agreement came. This agreement was called the Pac-Abiak na Bato. The Spanish government agreed to grant self-rule to the Philippines in 3 years if Aguinaldo would go to exile and surrender his arms. Aguinaldo agreed to this idea. He went to Hong Kong. However, there is a tiny problem with this agreement. The Filipinos and the Spaniards did not trust each other, so they had trust issues. The Spaniards did not pay the agreed amount. Likewise, the Filipinos did not surrender their arms. As a result, the agreement was a complete failure. This forced Aguinaldo to go back to the Philippines and declare the Philippine independence from Spain on June 12, 1898 at Kawit, Cavite. The Filipinos were happy with the idea with being independent until the United States made secret agreement called Treaty of Paris came. US wanted the Philippines as a colony, so Spain sold the Philippines to the United States. The Filipinos were not happy with the idea of being colonized. This forced Aguinaldo to issue a decree forming a Malolos Congress, which was a committee who was assigned to make the constitution for the first Philippine Republic. 3 days after the first Philippine Republic was established. The Malolos Constitution is also called the 1899 Constitution, or the first constitution for the first Philippine Republic and the first Republican Constitution in Asia. Now, let's move on to the salient features of the 1899 Constitution. First is a popular representative government. Second, a unicameral legislator. When I say unicameral, it means that there is only one legislator, called the Assembly. The Assembly had full control over the executive power. The President was elected by the Assembly. Third, there was already a separation of the church and state. Fourth, there was already a Bill of Rights. And last, it already had the compulsory and free basic education. Now, there is a problem with this constitution. It was not fully implemented because of the eruption of the Philippine-US War, in which the Philippines lost the battle and this paved way for American colonization in the Philippines. After the Spanish rule, the Americans came to the Philippines. The Filipinos were again colonized for the second time. During the American period, an American-inspired constitution was made. This was the 1935 Constitution, which provided the legal basis of the Commonwealth government or the transition government before granting the Philippine independence. Now, here are the salient features of the 1935 Constitution. First, it had a bicameral legislature. When I say bicameral, there are two legislators composed of a Senate and a House of Representatives. Second, the President was elected to a 4-year term, together with the Vice President without re-election. Third, it introduced the rights of suffrage, or the right to vote by male citizens of the Philippines who were 21 years of age or over and are able to read and write. Luckily, this right was extended to women as well. The 1935 Constitution was not the first constitution, but it was the first one to be fully implemented. However, the implementation was interrupted because of the Japanese occupation in the Philippines. During the American occupation in the Philippines, World War II broke out. The Japanese invaded the Philippines. For the third time, we were colonized again. After the Americans surrendered, the Japanese Republic was established and a new constitution was ratified in 1934 by the Filipino collaborators who were called Kapisanan ng Paglilingkod ng Bagong Pilipinas, popularly known as the Kalibabi. This was now the 1943 Constitution, or the Constitution of the Japanese-sponsored Second Republic of the Philippines. Here are the salient features of the 1943 Constitution. First, the 1943 Constitution provided for strong executive powers. Second, the legislature was a unicameral National Assembly, and only anti-US can run for election. Now, there was also a problem with this constitution. It was recognized as legitimate and binding only in the Japanese-controlled areas of the Philippines, and was completely ignored by the United States government and the Philippine government in exile. This was just a short-lived constitution because the Americans came back and freed us from the Japanese, and the 1935 Constitution was restored. After a few years, the Americans finally gave us our independence on July 4, 1946. Various presidents ruled the Philippines using the 1935 Constitution until President Marcos came into the picture. Ferdinand Marcos was first elected in 1965 and was re-elected in 1969. During his time, there was a plan to make a new constitution. Delegates were elected to a constitutional convention which began to meet in 1971. In 1972, just before the end of Marcos' second term, he declared martial law because of the growing communists. But according to many critics and victims of martial law, he did this to influence the ongoing Constitutional Convention. As a result, the Constitutional Convention wrote a constitution in line with what President Marcos wanted. This was the 1973 Constitution. Now here are the salient features of the 1973 Constitution. First, it established for the first time in Philippine history a parliamentary government with a prime minister and a president. Second, legislative powers was vested in a unicameral National Assembly elected by the people. And third, it legalized all the decrees, proclamation, and orders of the president. There were various amendments in the 1973 Constitution, but the most controversial was the 1976 Amendment. Here are the amendments in the 1976 Constitution. First, the National Assembly was replaced by the interim Batasang PAMBANSA. Second, the president would also become a prime minister and continue to exercise legislative powers until martial law was lifted. Now, Marcos thought that everything was in place until one of his enemies came back to the Philippines. This was Benigno Ninoy Aquino. Unfortunately for Ninoy, it was not a happy ending for him. He was assassinated, and this led to a widespread outrage and forced Marcos to hold the snap election. The results were controversial, that it forced the Filipino people to a historic uprising known as the EDSA People Power I, where Marcos and his family went to exile and Cory Aquino became the president. Immediately after Cory Aquino became the president, she abolished the 1973 Constitution and replaced it with the 1986 Constitution. The 1986 Constitution is also known as the Freedom Constitution. Now here are the salient features in the 1986 Freedom Constitution. First, it was a verbatim copy of the 1973 Constitution, minus the provision on the Batasang Pambansa because the Batasang Pambansa was completely abolished. Second, the country was in chaos after Marcos left, so Aquino vested in herself both the executive and the legislative powers, the same powers that President Marcos exercised under the 1973 Constitution. Third, it was just a transitional constitution that lasted for a year, and a new commission was created to draft a new constitution, which was the 1987 Philippine Constitution, sometimes known as an anti-Marcos Constitution. Now, the 1987 Philippine Constitution revolves around four themes. First, upholding national sovereignty. Second, democratic governments and the prevention of another dictatorship. Third, respect for human rights and civil liberties. And fourth, the promotion of social justice. It's not a perfect document, but it is the country's highest law, binding all the citizens of the Philippines. The Constitution provided for three governmental powers, namely executive, legislative, and the judicial branch. Now, these three work like a basketball game. In a basketball game, there are players, coaches, and of course a referee. The executive is like a coach who leads the team. The legislative branch, since it is divided into two houses, they act as players of the game, trying to score points against each other. And the judicial branch is much like the referee of the game that helps settle disputes. They are there to clarify the rules and make sure that each side is acting fairly. The basketball game wouldn't be complete without the viewers. This is the same with the government. It would not operate without the people. The powers of these three branches are separated from one another. This is what we call separation of powers. It also has a system of check and balances. In this system, each branch has the power to check, to restrain, or to stop the actions by the other branches. This is to prevent any one of them from becoming too powerful. That would be the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening.
Good day, Dr. COLINARES, and to everyone. I am Kathleen LEAL, and I will discuss about Batas Pambansa Bilang 232 and Republic Act number 9155. Let us talk about first the Batas Pambansa Bilang 232. It is an act providing for the establishment and maintenance of an integrated system of education. It provides the latest and more specific provisions on rights, duties, and parents' relation to education. This law enhanced further the promotion of discipline in the educational communities. It is approved on September 11, 1982. Let's move on to the general provisions, Chapter 1, Preliminary Matters. Under Section 1, the Act shall be known as the Education Act of 1982. In accordance with Section 2, this Act shall apply to and govern both formal and non-formal system in public and private schools in all levels of the entire educational system. Next is the Chapter 2, Declaration of Basic State Policy and Objectives. Under Section 3, Declaration of Basic Policy, to achieve and maintain an accelerating rate of economic development and social progress, to ensure the maximum participation of all people in the attainment and enjoyment of the benefits of such growth, and to achieve the strengthened national unity and consciousness and preserve, develop, and promote desirable cultural, moral, and spiritual values in a changing world. The state shall promote the right of every individual to relevant quality education regardless of sex, age, creed, socio-economic status, physical and mental conditions, racial or ethnic origin, political or other affiliations. The state shall therefore promote the maintain equality of access to education as well as the enjoyment of the benefits of education by its citizens. Next is under Section 4, Declaration of Objectives. First one is to provide for a broad general education that will assist each individual in the peculiar ecology of his own society. 2A. Attain his potential as a human being. B. Enhance the range and quality of individual and group participation in the basic functions of society. And C. Acquire the essential educational foundation of his development into a productive and versatile citizen. Second, train the nation's manpower in the middle level skills for national development. Third, develop the professions that will provide leadership for the nation in the advancement of knowledge for improving the quality of human life. And fourth, respond effectively to changing needs and conditions of the nation through a system of educational planning and evaluation. Towards the realization of these objectives, and pursuant to the Constitution, all educational institutions shall aim inoculate love of country, teach the duties of citizenship, and develop moral character, personal discipline, and scientific, technological, and vocational efficiency. Next is the educational community, Chapter 1, Preliminary Provisions. Under Section 7, Community Participation. Every educational institution shall provide for the establishment of appropriate bodies through which the members of the educational community may discuss the relevant issues and communicate information and suggestions for assistance and support of the school for the promotion of their common interests. Representatives from each subgroup of the educational community shall sit and participate in these bodies, the rules and procedures of which must be approved by them and duly published. There should be a democratic discussion between the educational institution and the community. They should be able to share and communicate for the common goods of both sides. Next is Chapter 2, Rights. Under Section 8, the right of parents. In addition to other rights under existing laws, all parents who have children enrolled in a school have the following rights. First is the right to organize by themselves and or with teachers for the purpose of providing a forum for the discussion of matters relating to the total school program and for ensuring the full cooperation of parents and teachers in the formulation and efficient implementation of such programs. We all know that the cooperation of the parents to the programs has a great impact on the result of it. Parents have the right to know the details or informations of the programs that will be implemented in the schools. Second, the right to access to any official record directly relating to the children who are under their parental responsibilities. Parents also have the right to access the record of their child, for example, the Form 137, good moral, honorable dismissal, and transcript of records. Next is Section 9, Right of Students in School. In addition to other rights and subject to the limitations prescribed by law and regulations, and students and pupils in all schools shall enjoy the following rights. First, the right to receive. They have the right to for the competent instruction, relevant quality education in line with national goals and conducive to their full development as person with dignity. Next is the right to freely choose their field of study subject to existing curricula. They have the right to choose to continue their course up to graduation. Um, Except in the cases of academic deficiency or violation or disciplinary regulations. Third, the right to school guidance and counseling services. They can get guidance for decisions and selecting the alternatives in fields of work suited to his potentialities. Students these days also needs more attention in their emotional issues and can share problems to the guidance and counseling services. Next, the fourth, the right of access to his own school records. They also have the right to access their own school records, and the school shall maintain and preserve its confidentiality. Fifth, the right to the issuance of official certificates. The right to the issuance of official certificates such as diplomas, transcript of records, grades, transfer of credentials, and other similar documents within 30 days of request. Sixth, the right to publish a student newspaper. The right to publish a student newspaper and similar publications, as well as the right to invite resource persons during assemblies, symposia, and other activities of similar nature. Seventh, the right to free expression of opinions and suggestions. Students have their own suggestions and opinions in which we need to hear and consider. They have the right to have effective channels of communication with appropriate academic channels and administrative bodies of the school or institution. 8. The right to form, establish, join, and participate in organization. They can join on this societies rec- they can join on these societies recognized by the school to foster their intellectual, cultural, spiritual and physical growth and development, or to form, establish, join, and maintain organizations and societies for purposes not contrary to the law. Last, the right to be free from involuntary contributions. They have the right to be free from involuntary contributions except those approved by their own organizations or societies. They should not be forced to contribute on unofficial contributions on school like donation drives and classroom funds. Next is Section 10, Rights of all school personnel. In addition to other rights provided by law, the following rights shall be enjoyed by all school personnel. First is the right to free expression of opinion and suggestion, and to effective channels of communications with appropriate academic and administrative bodies for the school or institution. Second, the right to be provided with free legal service by the appropriate government office in the case of public school personnel, and through the school authorities concerned in the case of private school personnel when charged in an administrative, civil, or criminal proceedings by the parties lawful discharge of professional duties and or in defense of school policies. Next is the right to establish, join, and maintain labor organization of their choice to promote their welfare and defend their interests. Fourth, the right to be free from involuntary contributions except those imposed by their own organizations. Under Section 11, special rights and or privileges of teaching and academic staff. First is the right to be free from compulsory assignments. Teachers have the right to be free from the workload not related to their duties as defined in their appointments or employment contracts, unless compensated conformably to existing law. We should not be given works that are not in our contracts. Sometimes teachers are abused in terms of receiving orders from the higher positions. Like in my past job, there are times that we have to give away school flyers in the weekends, and if we cannot attend to it, we will have a deduction in our salary. Next right is the right to intellectual property consistent with applicable laws. For example, the copyright. A copyright grants legal rights to anything you create that express or embodies an idea. It gives you exclusive right to copy, distribute, reproduce, display, and license the work. Third, teachers shall be deemed persons in authority when in the discharge of lawful duties and responsibility. They shall be accorded due respect and protection. Fourth, teachers shall be accorded the opportunity to choose alternative career lines either in school administration, in classroom teaching, or other for purposes of career achievements. Teachers shall be given a chance or opportunity to choose when we are applying. We can ask for the position that we wanted to apply to. Next is the special rights of school administration. School administration shall be deemed persons in authority while the discharge of lawful duties and responsibility, and shall be therefore be accorded due respect and protection. Next is rights of school. First is the right of their governing boards or lawful authorities to provide for the proper governance of the school and to adopt and enforce the administrative or management system. Second, the right for institutions or higher learning. This is to determine on academic grounds who shall be admitted to study, who may teach, and what shall be subjects of the study and research. Next is Chapter 3, Duties and Obligation. Under Section 40, Duties of Parents. In addition to those provided for under existing laws, all parents shall have the following duties and obligation. First is the parents individually or collectively shall help carry out the educational objectives in accordance with national goals. They have to help and follow the national goals for the better implementation of it. Second, parents shall be obliged to enable their children to obtain elementary education and shall strive to enable them to obtain secondary and higher education in the pursuance of the right formation of the youth. Third, parents shall cooperate with the school in the implementation of the school program, curricular and curricular. As I have said earlier, they have the right to cooperate to school program and also they have to cooperate with it for the effective result of the programs. Next is duties and responsibilities of student. First is to exert his utmost to develop his potential for services, particularly by undergoing an education suited to his abilities, in order that he may become an asset to his family and to the society. Second, uphold the academic integrity of the school. Endeavor to achieve academic excellence and abide by the rules and regulations governing his academic responsibilities and moral integrity. Third, promote and maintain the peace and tranquility of the school by observing the rules and discipline and by exerting efforts to attain harmonious relationship with fellow students and the teaching and academic staff and other school personnel. Fourth, participate actively in civic affairs, in the promotion of the general welfare, particularly in the social, economic, and cultural development of his community, and in the attainment of a just, compassionate, and orderly society. Fifth, exercise his rights responsibly in the knowledge that he is answerable for any infringement or violation of the public welfare and of the rights of others. Let's now move on to the teacher's obligation. Every teacher shall perform his duties to the school by discharging his responsibilities in accordance with philosophy, goals, and objectives of the school. Second, be accountable for the efficient and effective attainment of specified learning objectives in pursuance of national development goals within the limits of available school resources. Third, render regular reports on performance of each student and to the latter and the latter's parents and guardians with specific suggestions of improvement. Fourth, assume the responsibility to maintain and sustain his professional growth and advancement and maintain professionalism in his behavior at all times. Fifth, refrain from making deductions in students' scholastic rating for acts that they are clearly not manifestations of poor scholarship. 6. Participate as an agent of constructive economic, intellectual, cultural, and political change in the school and community within the context of national policies. Let's move on to the educational system, Chapter 1, Formal Education. When we say formal education, it refers to the structure and chronologically graded learning organized and provided by the formal school system and for which certification is required in order for the learner to progress through the grades or move to higher levels. Formal education shall correspond to the following levels. First is elementary education. This is the first stage of compulsory formal education, primarily concerned with providing basic education and usually corresponding to 6 or 7 grades, including preschool programs. Next is the secondary education. It is the state of formal education following the elementary level, concerned primarily with continuing basic education and expanding it to include the learning of employable gaining skills, usually corresponding to 4 years of high school. Third is tertiary education. It is a post-secondary schooling and it's also called higher education leading to a degree in a specific profession or discipline. Next is the chapter 2, the non-education and specialized education services. The state further recognizes its responsibility to provide, within the context of the formal education system, services to meet the special needs of the certain client. These specific types shall be guided by the basic policies of the state embodied in the general provisions of this act. First is the work education or practical arts. It is a program of basic education which aims to develop the right attitudes towards work and technical vocational education, post-secondary but non-degree programs leading to 1, 2, or 3 year certificates in preparation for a group of middle-level occupation. Second, the special education. It is an education of persons who are physically, mentally, emotionally, socially, or culturally different from the so-called normal. Individuals that they require modification of the school practices services to develop them to their maximum capacity. And third, the non-formal education. This is any organization or organized school-based educational activities undertaken by the Ministry of Education, Cultures and Sport, and other agencies and aimed at attaining the specific learning objectives for a particular client, specifically to the out-of-school youth and adults distinct from an outside and regular offerings of the formal school system. Next is Chapter 3, Establishment of Schools. Under Section 25, the establishment of schools, all schools shall be established in accordance with law. The establishment of new national schools and the conversion of existing schools from elementary to national secondary or tertiary school shall be by law. Under Section 27, Recognition of Schools, the educational operations of schools shall be subject to their prior authorization of the government and shall be affected by recognition in the case of government-operated schools, whether local, regional, or national recognition of educational programs, shall be deemed granted simultaneously with establishment. Under Section 29, Voluntary accreditation. The ministry shall encourage program of voluntary accreditation for institutions which desire to meet standards of quality over and above minimum required for state recognition. Next is Chapter 4, International Organizations of Schools. Organization of schools. Each school shall establish such internal organization as will best enable it to carry its academic and administrative functions, subject to limitations provided by law. Section 31, Governing Board. Every government, college, or university as a tertiary institution and every private school shall have a governing board pursuant to its charter or the Corporation Code of the Philippines, as the case may be. Section 32, Personal Transaction. In private school, the terms and conditions of employments or of personal government schools shall be governed by the civil service, budgetary and compensation laws and rules. In private schools, dispute arising from employee relations shall fall under the jurisdiction of Ministry of Labor and Employment as provided by law regulations. Next is the Chapter 5, School Finance and Assistance. Under funding of republic schools, um, schools under Section 34, National Funds, public schools shall continue to be funded from national funds provided that the local governments shall be encouraged to assume operation of local public schools on the basis of national fund, participation and adequate revenue sources which may be assigned by the national government for the purpose. Section 35, Financial Aid Assistance to Public Secondary Schools. The national government shall extend financial aid and assistance to the public secondary schools established and maintained by local governments, including barangay high schools. Section 36, Share of Local Government. Provinces, cities, and municipalities and barangays shall appropriate funds in their annual budgets for the operation and maintenance of public secondary schools on the basis of national fund participation. Section 37, Special Education Fund. Um, the proceeds of the Special Education Fund accruing to local governments shall be used exclusively for the purposes enumerated in Section 1, Republic Act Number 5447, in accordance with rules regulation issued by the Ministry of Education, Culture, Sports, and Ministry of the Budget. And Section 38, Tuition and Other School Fees. Secondary and post-secondary school may charge tuition and other school fees in order to improve facilities or to accommodate more students. And income from other sources. Government-supported educational institutions may receive grants, legacies, donation, and gifts for purposes allowed by existing law. Under the funding of private school, Section 40, funding of private schools. Private schools may be funded from their capital investment or equity contribution, tuition fees and other school charges, grants, loans, passive investment income, and income from other sources. Next is government assistance. The government, in the recognition of their complementary role in the educational system, may provide aid to the programs of private schools in the form of grants or scholarship, loans from government, financial institutions, provided the such programs meet certain defined educational requirements. Next is Section 42, Tuition and Other Fees. Each private school shall determine its rate of tuition and other school fees or charges. Next is Section 43, Income from Other Sources. Any private school duly recognized by the government may receive any grant, legacy, and donation, gift, request, or divest from individual, institution, corporation, foundation, trust of philanthropic organization, or research institution. Next is Section 44, Institutional Funds. The proceeds from tuition fees and other school charges, as well as other income of schools, shall be treated as institutional funds. Next is Chapter 5, Padin. Under assistance to students, government assistance to students. The government shall provide financial assistance to financially disadvantaged and deserving students. Next is grant of scholarship pursuant to existing law. Educational institutions shall be encouraged to grant scholarship to students pursuant to provisions of existing laws and such scholarships measures as may be provided for by the law. Next is assistance from the private sector. The private sector, especially educational institution, business, and industry, shall be encouraged to grant financial assistance to students, especially those undertaking research in fields of science and technology or in such projects may be necessary within the context of the national development. Let's now move on to the Republic Act number 9155. It is an act instituting a framework of governance for basic education, establishing authority and accountability, remaining the Department of Education, Culture and Sports as the Department of Education, and for the other purposes. Under Section 1 of it, this act shall be known as the Governance of Basic Education of 2001. In accordance with the Section 2, the declaration of policy, it is hereby declared the policy of the state to protect and promote the right of all citizens to quality basic education and to make such education accessible to all, the providing all Filipino children a free compulsory education in the elementary level and free education in the high school level. Um, Under Section 3, Purposes and Objectives. A. To provide the framework for the governance of basic education, which shall set the general directions for educational policies and standards and establish authority, accountability, and responsibility for achieving higher learning outcomes. B. To define the roles and responsibilities and provide resources to the field offices which shall implement the educational programs, projects, and services in communities they serve. C. To make schools and learning centers the most important vehicle for the teaching and learning of the national values and for developing in the Filipino learners love of country and pride in its rich heritage. D. To ensure that schools and learning centers receive the kind of focused attention they deserve and the educational programs, projects, and the services that take into account the interests of all members of the community. E. To enable the school and learning centers to reflect the values of the community by allowing teachers or learning facilitators and other staff to have the flexibility to serve the needs of all learners. And F. To encourage local initiatives for the improvement of schools and learning centers and to provide the means by which these improvements may be achieved and sustained. Let's now move on to the chapter 1. Governance of Basic Education under Section 5, Shared Governance. A principle which recognizes that every unit in the education bureaucracy has a particular role, task, and responsibility inherent in the office and for which it is principally accountable for outcome. The process of democratic consultation shall be observed in the decision-making process at appropriate levels. The principles of accountability and the transparency shall be operationalized in the performance of functions and responsibilities at all levels and the communication channels of field offices shall be strengthened to facilitate flow of information and expand linkages with other government agencies, local government units, and non-governmental organizations for the effective governance. Next is the governance of basic education, the national level. In addition to the powers under existing laws, the Secretary of Education shall have authority, accountability, and responsibility for the following: formulating the national educational policies, formulating a national basic education plan, promulgating national educational standards, monitoring and assessing national learning outcomes, and undertaking national educational research and studies. The Secretary of Education shall be assisted by not more than four undersecretaries and not more than four assistant secretaries whose assignment, duties, and responsibilities shall be governed by law. Next is in the regional level. Um, There shall be as many regional offices as may provided by law. Each regional officer shall have a director, an assistant, and an office staff for program promotion and supporting planning. Next is the division level. A division shall consist of province or a city which shall have a school divisions, superintendent, at least one assistant, school division superintendent, and office staff for programs, promotion, planning, administrative, fiscal, legal, auxiliary, and other support services. Next is school district level. Upon the recommendation of the school division superintendents, the regional director may establish an additional school district within a school division. School districts already existing at the time of the passage of this law shall be maintained. A school district shall have a school district supervisor and an office staff for programming promotion. Next is the school level. Um, there shall be a school head for all public elementary school and public high school or a cluster thereof, the establishment of integrated school from existing public elementary and public high school. The school head, who may be assisted by assistant school head, shall be both an instructional leader and administrative manager. The school head shall form a team with the school teachers or learning facilitators for delivery of quality educational programs, projects, and services. Next is Chapter 2, Transfer of Cultural Agencies. The Under Section 8, the cultural agencies are the Commission ng Wikang Pilipino, National Historical Institute, Record Management and Archive Office, and the National Library. Next is Chapter 3, Abolition of the Bureau of Physical Education and School Sports. Under Section 9, Abolition of BPES. All functions, programs, and activities the Department of Education related to sports competition shall be transferred to the Philippine Sports Commission or PSC. The program for school sports and physical fitness shall remain part of the basic education curriculum. The Bureau of Physical Education and School Sports or BPES is hereby abolished. The personnel of BPES presently detailed with the PSC are hereby transferred to the PSC without loss of rank, including the plantilla positions they occupy. All other BPES personnel shall be retained by the department. Next is Chapter 4, the last slide, the support and assistance of other government agency. Under Section 10, the Secretary of Education and the Secretary of Budget and Management. They shall, within 90 days from the approval of this act, jointly promulgate and guidance on the allocation, distribution, and utilization of resources provided by the national government for the field offices, taking into consideration the uniqueness of the working conditions of teaching services. Next is the Secretary of Education Education. Department of Education. The Secretary of Department of Education, subject to civil service laws and regulations, shall issue appropriate personnel policy rules and regulations that will best meet the requirements of the teaching professions, taking into consideration the uniqueness of the working conditions of the teaching service. And the last is Section 12, the Commission on Audit. Excuse me. In the issuance of audit rules and regulations that will govern the utilization of all resources as well as the liquidation, recording, and reporting thereof shall take into account the different characteristics and distinct features of the department's field offices, its organizational setup, as well as the nature of the operations of schools and learning centers. So those are my report, the Batas Pambansa bilang 232 and Educational Act of 9132. So, thank you for listening and God bless.